How do you feel about recycling? I've talked a lot about recycling on this podcast, and I've talked a lot about it from a benefit standpoint and also from a not so good standpoint, because we know a lot of the items that get recycled within our area, or maybe we thought were getting recycled, weren't getting recycled. But today on the podcast, we have Tom Szaky, who is the founder and CEO of TerraCycle. He is here to talk about TerraCycle and how TerraCycle pretty much recycles anything. And he says it's based on how much people are willing to pay for it. He breaks it down into formulas, very insightful conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to hopefully change your mind about recycling and maybe participating in some of these programs that TerraCycle has to offer. They're all around the world. It's a lot of fun. We're talking about plastic pollution in the ocean. We're talking about microplastics and how they could be maybe used and how much it costs to use something like that into making other products, all on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking to Tom Szaky, who is the founder and president and CEO of TerraCycle. TerraCycle is an organization that takes your waste. It's making waste the hero, as Tom says, and brings it into a production line to make different products that you will buy or that somebody will buy, and truly recycles these types of items, and also provides ways for you can recycle pretty much anything. I think it's really important to have these types of conversations to understand that there are companies who are out there working in waste, and there's so many opportunities to work in waste, but people are just not doing the work. And it's something that has to be done in the future if we want to truly reduce our waste. Obviously, we have to reduce our waste at the point of consumerism. When we're buying something, we get to vote for that every time we pay for something. We also have to understand that, as waste increases and as products are built to have more waste, we have to be able to recycle that type of waste as well. So on both ends, right? We don't want to just say recycling is the only way. We want to do it for both ends. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this, but I think it's something that people are going to love, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Tom Szaky from TerraCycle. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Tom, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about TerraCycle?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. This it's great to have you on the podcast. This has been a bucket list of mine. I've been a big fan of TerraCycle for a long time. I'm happy to have you on to be able to, if not introduce, or just to kind of let people in behind the curtain of TerraCycle, what it's all about, how it came to be, and just how people can get involved in submitting items and so forth. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to have this podcast published for the audience to be able to hear. So before we get into all of that, Tom, why don't you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Tom, and I'm the founder and CEO of TerraCycle. And if you haven't heard of TerraCycle, we've been around now for, actually next year will be our 25th year of operation, so a little bit of time.
Awesome.
I know, it's amazing how time flies. And we operate all over the world in 21 countries. And the things we do are all about fulfilling our central mission, which is eliminating the idea of waste. And that can range from cleaning up high-risk litter. We run Bangkok's biggest river cleanup system, all the way to recycling things that are not traditionally recyclable. We are the world's largest cigarette butt recycler, or world's largest coffee capsule recycler, and hundreds of other waste streams. We help companies then make their things from waste, from Olympic podiums to the world's first shoe from shoes, or pen from pens. And then we really push upstream on how do we really shift out of just recycling things to reusing. All on this journey for how do we solve for the idea of waste.
It's incredible what you guys are able to do and what you've been able to accomplish over the last 25 years. How this is what I want to find out is how did this all build? Like, where did this all begin? Yeah. Take us from the beginning. Cause we've heard the recycling sort of story. People came out, recycling was a big thing, but then we realized that, oh, wait a minute, not everything is recycled, and a lot of things we think is recycled isn't. But TerraCycle can kind of recycle stuff that we just don't think is recycled. Right. So how did this whole idea start?
Yeah, it's a wild story. So look, I've always loved entrepreneurship as a young kid, like my lemonade stand was badass when I was like 12, I started my first company at 14, nothing purposeful, just like a web design
Right.
company, but still, like I love
Hey.
the idea of entrepreneurship. And when I got to college, I had this real turning point where one of the classes I took was Introduction to Economics, like Econ 101.
Yep.
And the professor gets up, opening lecture, first class, first everything, and says, "What's the purpose of business?" Which is a highly appropriate question. And long story short, the answer she was looking for was maximizing profit to shareholders. And like that fell flat for me, right?
Yes.
It fell flat because there's so many stakeholders a business serves that don't give two shits about profit to shareholders. How can that be the point, right? And it got sort of this journey going for me where I was starting to really meditate on this, and where I landed, maybe slightly utopian, is that maybe profit is an indicator of health. So it's critically important, right?
Of course.
If your business is not profitable, it will die and it will not be healthy and strong, right? It's unhealthy. And inversely, if it's profitable, it will be flourishing, have longevity, all those things. But maybe that then leaves room for what is the actual purpose, right? Because our purpose on the planet is not to be healthy, but we have to be healthy to manifest anything. Is then how does the business, make the world better in some fashion, right? In some way. And that felt much more comfortable for me. And then I started thinking, as one does, like, where should I focus? And, the honest story is my friends, this was now, mind you, like 25 years ago. So the legal relationship with growing pot was very different than today.
Yes.
But my friends up in Canada started, sort of growing some stuff in their basement. They couldn't really figure it out. I get invited up fall break freshman year because they had, the plants were working well, and they were when I got into their home. And I asked them, like, how did you guys do this? And they said we were taking organic waste, feeding it to worms, and using the worm poop to make the plants flourish.
That's fantastic.
And that lit the initial spark for me on making the topic of interest, and it's become now a life's journey on exploring waste. Because what I realized is that, and have continued to realize, is waste is filled with the idea of waste is filled with a phenomenal amount of anomalies. The anomaly I noticed right then and there was, wait a minute, it's garbage. So you guys could get paid to take this, and then you can get paid for the output. Like you have negative raw material costs.
Right.
In fact, an interesting thing, because I was drawing, in econ classes, lots of supply and demand curves, and garbage is the only commodity that you cannot draw on a traditional supply and demand curve because it intersects in the negative quadrant. In other words, it has monster supply, but negative demand. In other words, in Japan, for example, the legal definition of waste is something you pay to get rid of.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious when it's said, but it's, there's this sort of counterintuitiveness.
Definition.
That's the legal definition. Because otherwise, like if I have an object, here's a pen, it's my property. Even if it's empty, broken, it's still my property. I can give that to you. I can do all sorts of things. It's the moment I say I need to pay someone to remove it, that's when it's garbage. Right?
That's insane to think about that way.
Yeah, it's not just that, it goes on and on, right? Like garbage is filled with these phenomenal anomalies, which are interesting. And if you can learn about them, it really helps starting to bring out the solutions. So, another example, right, just to sort of give you some more, is, isn't it interesting that the only industry in the world that will legally possess all of your property one day, with no exception, is the garbage industry? Legally possess, not be paid to transport, not have some touch on it, but legally possess. And 99% of what we buy becomes the property of a garbage company within the year of purchase. And for how big these statements are, it's also objectively the least innovative industry per dollar of revenue it has. Why? Because it's smelly, nasty, gross, not metaphorically, but like in the flesh, right? It's not a attractor of sexiness and talent and all this jazz, right? It's also, though, an incredibly modern idea. And I've written books on this topic, but it was invented in the 1950s, which is 75 years ago.
Unreal.
Isn't that wild, right? Before this, yes, we, like all organisms, we had outputs always, from chimpanzees to now, but our outputs up until the 50s were something that nature has systems to digest.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Our chair that you and I are sitting on would have been made from wood. You could throw it in the forest. The forest would have no problem with it. Today, it's probably some polymer plastic that the forest is not going to be so happy with.
Right.
Our clothing would have been made from what? Like cotton, wool, maybe silk. Today, 60% of the clothing we wear is some petrochemical derivative, nylon, latex, different sort of, advanced materials. And we then exacerbate this by consuming today 10 times more than we did just back then in the 1950s. Right. And it goes on and on. And so this became really fascinating. But, the truth is TerraCycle then started as a worm poop company. The logo I drew was a worm originally.
It's a worm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a worm. TerraCycle is earth cycle, worm poop. And we first started the journey by basically saying, to solve waste, let's take garbage and make products out of it. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting, and it worked, the worm poop business grew. I dropped out of school and, off we went. But we had this big reflection, maybe, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years in. And we're at that point like a $5-6 million small worm poop business of, are we going to really achieve our mission by making products out of garbage? Because what we started realizing is we were trying to make the best product. And even if we say it must be made from waste, we would, as a result, be taking certain organic waste to feed the worms, but not other. We were taking certain used soda bottles to package the worm poop, but not others, right? We're picking the best of what is technically garbage. And then we would never deal with the bulk of it, right?
Right.
And so that created a massive shift for us. We decided to effectively close down the worm poop business and refocus on making the garbage the business hero, not the output, not the product. And that's sort of how we landed on the, where we are today, and off we went.
That's incredible. And if you think about too how society has changed, even the products that we had back, I'm in my 40s, so back when I was a kid, like the furnace, your dishwasher, your computers, they all lasted a long time. Yeah. They all lasted, like, especially like the long items, like the dishwasher and all that kind of stuff. You're looking at 25, 30 years before you're thinking of replacing it. Now you're probably looking at a life cycle for those, like a dishwasher. I remember talking to some people and they're like, you're looking at like 3 to 5 years. And as soon as it's broken, it's more expensive to fix than it is to get a new one, which is insane to me. And I guess that's more of the economy. They want you to churn out and buy more new things, but that increases the amount of waste that we produce, right?
Massively. And what's so interesting, you're referring like to this concept of planned obsolescence, right?
Yes.
Where things are planned to break because that's better for the economy for you to buy a new dishwasher in 3 years than to maybe repair one in 20 years. Because that's the other thing. Not only are all these things made like much poorer quality. Now, you could argue, what's the virtue of that? Because we're going to shit all over this for a moment. So let's talk about the positives. The positives is that dishwasher is technically cheaper than it was before relative to your income, right? Like the amount of labor hours you have to put out to get the dishwasher has gone down.
Yes.
Right? A good example is like 100 years ago, this 1920s, we would buy an average of 2 apparel items a year and use them for 20 years before disposal. Today, it's 66 apparel items per year, worn on average 3 times before disposal. But a key part of this
incredible.
Is why? I bet you a wool sweater would have been a lot more labor hours 100 years ago than it is today. Right? Today, it's 10 minutes of labor. Back then, it could have been weeks of labor hours that you have to earn to spend on that. Yeah. And now the planned obsolescence thing is so fascinating because, I don't know, it was actually proposed as a law back in, I think it was in the UK at some point when the economy was down. It was proposed as regulation saying manufacturers must take back or break objects in short period of time to spur the economy. Right, to create more consumption. It never passed because it's sort of grotesque, but it was proposed in that way. And then what happened is companies realized that, well, we should, this is good business anyway. It doesn't have to be regulated. We should do that. A very famous example of this is, incandescent light bulbs. Now, they've been really disrupted by the LED bulbs. But back in the day when we would just buy incandescent bulbs, what was it, like 5,000 hours on a light bulb, right? Mm-hmm. You know how long, when the incandescent bulb was first commercialized, how long the light bulb lasted? This is like 100 years ago. There's still one burning in a Florida firehouse that has not gone out in 100 years. And what happened is the light bulb manufacturers realized if we make light bulbs that last forever, we're not going to sell that many.
Yeah. So
they created a cartel that purposefully took down the life of a light bulb, still to this day.
Just so that they can sell more.
Right. So, but it's important to understand the tension, right? Because that's the only way one can then figure out how to solve it, right? We shifted because we also vote for this, right? We buy these things. We vote for their existence. And what drives our vote is generally convenience of low cost, because that conveniently allows us to buy more things, and convenience in all other ways, fast delivery, easy. Mending is less convenient than buying new. That's why we don't cobble our shoes or darn our socks or fix anything anymore, right?
Right.
And that really drives then increase of economy. So they go hand in hand. Everyone's happy from a business point of view, right?
Right.
It just creates this phenomenal externality, not just of waste, mind you, but like every environmental issue we face, climate change, species diversity loss, which I think in the ocean is manifesting way more than it is on land, because we don't see it, right?
We don't even know about it.
No,
like right?
I bet you if we say, what is the World Wildlife Fund said that we lost 50% of our species diversity in the past 50 years.
Yeah.
I bet you that's more terrestrial than it is aquatic. And I bet
100%.
you if you went aquatic, it would be worse.
Could be in the 90s.
Yeah,
Could
exactly.
be in the 90s.
Right. So all these externalities are linked to one thing only, us voting for them by buying things that create extraction.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing to reckon with in this whole gluttonous consumption of cheap crap.
Right. Now, but with that, like, it's hard to look at the system that we're in right now. And because a lot of people will say, like, I guess they'll say, first of all, I guess that, like, we look at this waste, we know that we're in a system where there's a lot of waste.
Yes.
So, and we know recycling on a grand scale is not what we hoped it would be. It's not what it was sold to be, right?
Yes, that's right.
But TerraCycle takes it a little differently, because you guys are not just recycling to make the same products, like say a water bottle to back into a water bottle. You're actually taking it and making different products. I think, remember when I first discovered TerraCycle, it was like park benches and things like that.
Yep.
Where did that idea come from? Like, to be like, oh, we're just going to make like brand new products from these like waste items.
Well, if I'm going to take a step back to answer your question. Right?
Sure.
Because you mentioned that, recycling isn't what we thought it would be. And I think you're precisely right. But I want to peel that open a little bit.
Yeah,
because
please
that
do.
will frame everything we talk about, right?
Perfect.
And this was one of those academic things that, we dove into when we shifted away from being a worm poop business as to what really makes something recycled. Right? Like actually get recycled. And here's the problem, is that we have a misunderstanding of the system. That's why it's not what we hoped it would be. We perceive, and this has been, we've studied this in our consumer insights department, with consumers all over the world, everywhere. And unanimously, people view recycling as a public service, similar to, say, healthcare or education. And the concept in healthcare is if the cure exists or the therapy exists to help you, it will be given to you. Irrelevant of the cost and your income. It's just, I mean, maybe America's a bit different, but like everywhere else, right? Yeah. It's almost like a moral obligation to, treat whatever is the issue. And the difference, though, is recycling is not a public service. It is carried out unanimously, with no exception, by only for-profit companies everywhere in the world. There is no law that tells those for-profit companies that they have to recycle anything.
Right.
They choose what gets recycled. And so really, when you go below the surface, what makes a cardboard box or an aluminum can recycled in most countries that have recycling? It's not that it's special. It's because it's profitable to recycle. And what makes 95% of objects not recyclable, like if we just look at each other, our clothing, the electronics, this pen, most things in our video, not recycled, is not that it can't be. It just costs more to collect and process, and the results are worth.
Interesting.
That's it. It's just economics. Like, another way to think about this is, how can you make an object go circular? Is, I think, only one of two ways. Imagine if I put an object in front of you, right? Either that object has to have enough intrinsic value in it that you're like, yeah, thank you for putting this object in front of me. If I put a bar of gold in front of you, I'm sure you'd be thrilled, right? Or whatever, right? But if I put something that isn't valuable in front of you, well, the only way to do it is to pay you. And at some point, when I pay you enough, your happiness will get to the point where you'll happily deal with that object and give it a new life, no matter what it is, right?
Right.
And that is the foundational point. So when people say recycling is broken, it's because they put things in the recycling bin that they hope will be recycled that aren't recycled. And that's because the way it's communicated implies that that'll happen, which is poor. It's bad framing. A really good example of this is, say, those clothing bins, because this is really tied to, pollution in the ocean, right? Like we put our used clothing into those charity bins. They may be in front of a school or a church, whatever it may be. And what do we think happens? We think what happens is our clothing will then be gone to a good use. Someone in need will use it. But here's the reality, right? That entire business is driven by the resale value of the clothing, period. Because it costs more to recycle clothing than the resulting materials are worth. So there's no economics to recycle it. It is just driven by the resale value. Now, in America, if we put a bunch of used clothing, remember, that's our garbage that we don't want.
Yeah.
Only 1% of it can be resold in America. Because it's stuff we didn't want to begin with. You know what I mean? Right? So the sorting centers that take this will sort out the brand name goods, the Patagonia jackets, the Levi jeans that are in good quality. Ironically, probably shouldn't have been thrown into the bin to begin with. That will get resold at a vintage store in the US. 99% gets baled and sold by the kilo to emerging countries. Now, let's say you and I are the vintage shop, used clothing shop in, Ethiopia.
Yeah.
We're going to be excited to buy this stuff because we're buying clothing by the kilo, way cheaper than making it.
Way cheaper, yeah.
Way cheaper. But we're going to buy it eyes wide open that about 2/3 no one's going to buy. But 1/3 they're going to buy, and that makes the business economics work. But what do we do with that 2/3? We dump it. And so what I'm trying to highlight here is that is exactly how it works. Now, the problem is the person putting it into the Goodwill bin, in Kansas City, thinks everything is going to be reused, because the bin shouldn't just say this is a reuse bin. It should say, if the clothing has a market on it and someone's going to buy it, it will certainly be reused. And if it isn't, it's going to be dumped. That would be the accurate way to describe that process. And I think that's the essence. Once you view recycling as actually just urban mining for material value, everything makes sense from there.
That is so interesting. It's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast is the fact is, like, if it's recyclable, there's a demand out there for that product at some point, whether it's in its true form or whether it's in another form. So for TerraCycle, when you first came out with this vision to say, okay, we're going to take products and we're going to make another product out of this, or waste, sorry, I should say waste from products, and we're going to make another product. How did you choose the waste? Was it waste that nobody else was going to take, or was it waste that you knew was going to fit would do well in a park bench?
Well, it's a good question, right? So like when we first began in the worm poop days, we were a consumer product company making products from waste, from fertilizer to bird feeder, then later backpacks and whatever. And there we said, we want to make a backpack. What's the right waste to make it from? Maybe we sew together juice pouches and make a backpack. So we then started as a classic consumer good thought process where the product is the hero. Yeah. And what waste inputs can we make the product from? When we realized that that is limited because we're going to pick only the best garbage, we switched it and said the garbage has to be the hero. And remember, the issue is solely economics. Everything in the world can be recycled. I've not seen a waste stream that cannot be. The only times it cannot be is if there's a law preventing it. A bloody glove from an operating room legally can't be recycled, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
But other than that, they all can. It's just a question of money, right? So I'll give you an example. We're the world's largest coffee capsule recycler, and recycling a coffee capsule is always going to come at a cost. It's never going to make money. And that's, again, 95% of goods. So because the money is the issue, what we first said is let's go to stakeholders that are willing to pay and fund for recycling to exist on certain waste streams. And the intuitive stakeholder could be like the people who made it, whose logo is on it, right? It could be the retailer who sold it. It could be maybe where it's consumed, like a pool may care about swimsuit and goggle recycling disproportionately. Right? They're certainly not going to care about recycling bicycle helmets. Right. And so it's about finding those stakeholders who are willing to fund. Now, when you have the funding, let's just take an example like cigarette butts, right? Most littered item in the world. It could be the tobacco company. It could be a retailer that might sell cigarettes. It could be maybe a city, because they have high rates of litter on these, or other stakeholders. Then we bring that into our R&D organization, and we first make sure that we can find a recycling solution for it. That's before we set up a program. And generally speaking, what we're looking at is, can we take the thing apart? And can we reconstitute the materials? So for example, in cigarette butts, the breakthrough that really helped enable that was the ability to separate the paper that's glued onto the filter from the filter. Because the filter is plastic and the paper is paper fiber, right?
Yep.
And once we have that, we have a process set up, then we start building the program and getting it bigger and bigger. As that happens, we don't stay there on the process. We keep trying to refine the process to get to the gold standard, which is it goes right back into what it started with. That's the end point we try to get to if there is the appetite from the stakeholders and, because that takes a lot of resource to achieve that. So we will, let's take shoe recycling as a good example. When we first started, we figured out how can we take the shoe apart, separate all the components, make sure we can reconstitute those. And there, a big breakthrough was how do we take shredded leather and make new rolls of leather, right? And we did that by shredding them, and then you can sort of hear them together to create a new leather compound, almost like in wine corks, you have like a normal natural cork, but then you may see a natural cork, but it's made from lots of little pieces, like a Birkenstock sole.
Yep.
That sort of effect, right?
Okay.
Now, once we had that, then the question was, how do we go more than that? And then we started working with shoe companies to turn the shoes into things they care about, like sports surfaces. And just last year with ASICS, we launched with them their first shoe made from used shoes. But that is the highest technical achievement, right? Like that is really tough and requires a lot of research. And a lot of investment on part of the partner who really needs to lean in, because I can't do that without them wanting to lean in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's sort of the journey we take. But the big white elephant in the room is that it's all about the money flow, right? Someone has to fund it, because in parallel to this advancement in all sorts of advanced materials that nature doesn't have systems for, and us consuming quite a bit, within all that, the biggest mega trend in object design is cost reduction. Everything is cheaper tomorrow than today. Everything. And as you reduce costs and things, the value that you can recover intrinsically goes down. Right? Yeah. The thing I'm putting in front of you looks less and less like a gold bar every day.
Right. That's so cool. That is so cool. So how do you decide what items can be made from the waste that you're collecting, or even what waste you collect to make? Like, do you still, is it a chicken and egg kind of situation? Like, what product do you want to make, and then what waste would be best?
It's actually very linear. So I'll walk you through it. So the first part is, because the issue is a money flow. The first question is, where is their willingness to fund? So if, for example, we have willingness from a great company like Rip Curl to fund wetsuit recycling, then we're going to focus on wetsuits. If inversely we can't find anyone to want to fund bicycle helmet recycling, that won't be the focus, because without the money flow, nothing happens, right? Because everything costs more than the results are worth.
So you depend on the vision and the effort being willing to be put in by a specific company or investor to invest in that.
Yes.
In order to even start even thinking about
it
doing
needs
something.
To be some stakeholders. So if you take wetsuits, it could be like Rip Curl's a partner, so it could be the wetsuit manufacturer.
Right.
But it could be maybe a dive shop, Right. It could be a diving coalition. It could be any stakeholder, but it's going to be someone who cares more about wetsuits than the average bear,
Okay.
Then
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the next step is like, are they collecting the waste, or are they just,
so
that's
great. Yeah. So then the next step comes, which is, okay, now that we know that there's interest, right?
Yeah.
Then we think through, because what are the costs they pay? They pay for whatever it costs to collect the waste, what it costs to convert that into a sellable material, minus what the sellable material is worth. Right. That's the cost. So then we think through, how do we collect? And collection is not just about how do you collect as cheaply as possible. Collection's also about how do you create as much value for whoever's paying for it as possible. So take the wetsuit example. A really good business logic for someone like Rip Curl is, wait a minute, if I offer wetsuit recycling, maybe I run a promotion saying, we Rip Curl will recycle any brand of wetsuit, but when you do, we'll give you 10% off your new one, but of our brand, right?
Gotcha.
Because as long as you can build in some business logic, the money flow gets bigger, right? And then these programs can get incredibly large. Like, in some cases, like in coffee capsule recycling in Canada, we collect back 30% of what is consumed.
That's
but
amazing.
It's also one of the best drivers of which brand you choose.
Yes.
And those are connected concepts, because money flow comes from business in many cases.
Yeah.
So Then we think about the collection. So in that example, the collection for wetsuits would probably be in retailers, because that's where you're going to make your next purchasing decision. Then we also think about how do we make the collection as convenient and as affordable as possible, so it's easy for someone to take part and it doesn't break the bank, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I
Was going to say, for example, we mentioned it right before we started to record. Arbonne is a company that I use. I have these little fizz sticks, which is like little green tea extract, and they come in individual packages, plastic packages. And there's a program with TerraCycle where I can, basically when I'm finished, that comes with basically like a label to go to TerraCycle plus a package, and you just stuff that package as much as you can. Secure it, you zip it up, and then you send it to Purelator, and Purelator sends it over to you guys. And sometimes I'll have like 3 or 4, and I'll save them all up, and then I'll just send them off. Makes it easy for me. I literally just drop it off. I don't have to do anything else. It's probably one of the simplest processes for me. And then I know that the product that I use is going to be used for something better than what if I just threw it out in the garbage.
Exactly right. Yeah. So and there's dozens of different methods of collection, right? It could be what you described, which would be a mail-in model. It could be public locations, like I think in Canada, where something like 50% of all the schools, public schools, K through 12 schools, use our programs, and many other awesome. Such examples. Then we think through, and this goes to your question on what do we make. It is first we have to make sure that we can recycle it, that we can take it apart and reconstitute the materials. And then, honestly, to make the price as cheap as possible, we sell the materials to whoever pays the most.
Yeah.
And to us, it's not, that's the key, because that's going to get then the program to be as big as possible. Now, we don't stop there. Then we go back to the company, whether it's Arbonne or Rip Curl or whichever one, and say, now that this is all functioning, how do we really elevate the waste and try to get it to go right back into your system so it becomes as closed loop as possible?
Yeah. That
may start with deployments, like marketing deployments. Like with Colgate, we've built, I think, 24 playgrounds from toothpaste tubes and toothbrushes, or with Procter & Gamble from their waste, every Olympic podium since the Tokyo Olympics, and so on. So
really?
It could be that sort of stuff. Wow. But then we say, okay, how do we get it more into your system? Maybe then we start making the displays their products sit on, or the fixtures for their stores, with the end goal to be right back into what it began from. And that's the journey that our R&D team takes over many years to make sure that we can formulate the waste, make it behave in the way that it needs to be able to create that outcome. Because these products were never designed with the idea of being recyclable into themselves.
So your R&D team, is it just consists of a number of different engineers and product engineers and marketers and so forth?
It's mostly polymers. It's not just polymer, but it's like material scientists. So it's people who specialize in alloys or plastics, or polymers or fibers or glass. We have a whole laboratory, a big one out here, where it's about the ability to take the waste and then process it in a way that it can be used for a certain application.
Makes sense.
Right. A very simple example of this would be, if you collect, let's say, potato chip bags, the color of the plastic at the end that you get is going to be green. It's going to be green because when you mix all the inks together, what comes out is green. It's sort of like when kids have paint and they mix it all together, like Play-Doh, it becomes brown. In the world of recycling, green is the brown, right? And now you need to make that color something that someone actually wants to use in their product. So that's a very simple example of like the coloration, but it could be how fast the plastic melts, how strong is it, how bendable is it? Those are more sophisticated characteristics.
Oh, that's incredible. It must feel great to be able to run a company that has such benefits to the environment, right? That has such like it must make you feel good, like to do this, especially when you're able to find something new and have a new partner to be like, oh, okay, this is great. Are you always, you and your team, are you guys always thinking of different companies that you can partner with based on like the material that they have? Been like, oh, if we had this material, like if we had this waste of, like, if this running shoe, goes to waste, this, like what's in it will really help us make, such and such. So like, do you guys always think about that?
Inverted. Okay. In what you said, right? When we were at the beginning of the worm poop days, that's how we thought. We want to make X. What do we need?
Right.
Now we think, what are the things that, what are the waste problems? How do we set up a program on that waste problem? And then what can happen to it to make sure that it continues to flow? So the logic shifted. In our early days. It was, what do we want to make and what do we need, to
Yeah.
what are things that are creating waste issues and how can we collect them and make sure that something
Right.
new is made from them. It shifted. It looks
Yeah.
from the surface identical,
Right.
but it's what is the tail that wags the dog, if you will.
Yeah.
And in our world today, it's about, there is this, whatever it is, there is a waste issue. How do we help bring solution to that issue using the power of business to do it?
So you're at a point of like, how do we make the biggest impact to
Yes.
waste systems, like, in
Yes.
terms of recycling? Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And this is, and I don't know if you have an answer to this, because this would solve a lot. Obviously we can't get it, but imagine if we could go out and, and like microplastics is probably the biggest problem in the ocean
Massive.
right now. It's like a soup, right? As you know.
Yes.
If we could dredge, or not dredge, but like net like a water column and collect, say tons and tons and tons of microplastics.
Yeah.
Was that something that you'd be like, okay, so here's somebody's willing to do this. If we can go out, and not that it'll solve the waste problem, but we could at least recoup some of it, have a reason to recoup.
Yes.
And mind you, it would probably be extremely expensive with boats and everything like that. But how do we how do we take this out to make a valuable product? Can you make products from microplastics? I guess.
Yes.
Is the question.
The answer is yes. Right.
Okay.
So not only have we been able to take microplastics and recycle them into new materials, we've done, with the World Wildlife Fund, we did a massive project in our Japanese division around ghost nets, where we were collecting ghost nets and turning them into new products. We did a big thing with Head and Shoulders, where we released a Head and Shoulders bottle made from beach plastic. We've done a lot, of these sort of activities. They can all be done. What's the white elephant in the room in this example is something like the soup of microplastics that is contaminated all of our aquatic systems.
Right.
There is not the money flow attached to cleaning that up is negligible relative to the size of the issue.
Yes.
It would be trillions of dollars to clean that up.
True.
And because no one knows the genesis of that microplastic, like did it come from a chip bag or did it come from a soda bottle or where did it come from? The stakeholders to fund don't feel that responsibility,
right.
To do so, or don't feel that if they invest that much money into it, they're going to somehow, get some value out of it. That's enough to blend to the size of the issue. That's the big issue in the whole ocean plastic space, right? The other key issue is the impact is bigger the more we go upstream. So, for example, it's the most expensive per se ton of plastic to clean up the microplastics.
Yes.
It is slightly less expensive to clean up the floating fractions that may be at the top. You'll notice that a lot of the ocean cleanup projects that are out there, and they're all doing phenomenal work, they're more thinking about the stuff at the top because you can get more kilos out per dollar, right?
Gotcha.
And 95% of ocean plastic is the soup below. 5% or so is the stuff floating at the top, which we get all the visuals from the photos and so on. One step more upstream, which is like the work of our foundation, is to not collect it in the ocean, but collect it in the canals and waterways before it ends up in the ocean.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's even more affordable because, it's easier to do that where you have, like in Thailand, what we do in Bangkok is I have a lot of like river traps, right, that are somewhat connected to land and then into the river that skim it off. We can very easily drive a vehicle, empty it out, versus doing all that through boats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what you'll notice, and then as you go further upstream, it's even more cost effective to collect it before it ends up in the river.
Of course. And
the object, and that's not just on the collection cost, but also on the of the cost you have to spend to process versus what you can sell it for at the end. Because to process, let's say the most hardest stuff, like the true microplastic soup, is exceptionally expensive because it's filled with salt and algae and all this stuff, and the output is very low grade. Right? So, because remember, the costs are collection and processing minus value.
Yeah.
And that equation is the worst for microplastics. That's why it's a multi-trillion-dollar issue. Now, I think my theory on this, by the way, is that in the end, it'll be okay, all of this, because the world is phenomenal at inventing digestive systems for everything. Now, I don't know if you know the story of coal, but that's like a great example of this, right? What was it like? Trees emerged onto the earth, but there was no fungus or bacteria or digestive systems to digest the trees when they died. So what happened? The trees died and just stayed on land.
Yeah.
Enough of these piled on top of each other and pressurized, and that's how coal got created.
Right.
But coal was only created for about a 50 to 100 million year span, because after about 50 to 100 million years, nature evolved its digestive system for trees. And now no tree produces coal because it will rot and decompose before ever it has an opportunity to be pressurized into coal. And I think over that same time frame, the earth will clean itself up. It will naturally evolve digestive systems, as we see certain bacteria eating plastics and so on. It'll just take 100 million years. And a huge amount of damage will have been produced, in that time frame. I think that's why the challenge is on humanity, right? I think for us, our key challenge is, can we rise above sort of animalistic, tendencies to curb consumption? Because that's very basic animalistic, sort of tendency.
Yeah.
And can we clean up our own mess and not rely on some other system to clean it up? And let's note that neither of those are animalistic tendencies, right? When an animal poops in the forest, it's not going to bother cleaning it up.
No.
No. If it dies in the forest, it's not going to clean up the body, right? Another one, and it cannot control its appetite.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think it's interesting. Like, you've already talked about prevention of getting plastic into the ocean. You talk about TerraCycle already has systems. Was it in Bangkok? Is that what you mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah, in Bangkok. Now, obviously, we can't have systems everywhere. It's difficult because it's a huge investment. So, did you just does TerraCycle choose based on where the investment's willing to be made at this point?
Is that simple? I think of two parts: where we react and where we invest. Right.
Right.
So, the answer: why are we in Thailand doing that work? Because that's where we got investment to do it. If the capital that emerged said to us, we care about Indonesia, then we'd be there. Right. We really, because the problem is the same. Doesn't matter. It's a floating piece of garbage, and one is the same as the other, the negative externalities. But then the other part is where we choose to invest. And our biggest investment to date, and we've put about $50 million into this. So for our size, that's a huge number, has been in how do we bring out reuse? Because recycling is a solution to the symptom of waste, but it's not solving waste at the root cause. It is not eliminating the idea of waste. And if you think about it, right, like back before the 1950s, when we cobbled our shoes and darned our socks and mended our clothing and all this stuff, we also, our soda was in reusable bottles. Our motor oil was in reusable bottles. Everything was much more repair, reuse based. And we believe that is what we need to return to.
Yeah.
We can only do so, though, by matching the convenience and affordability of disposability, or it will always be something we aspire to but never do. We read the article about it, we listen to the podcast about it, we're like, how cool is that? But then we still shop normally when we're at our local Walmart,
Right.
And that's what we're really focused on. And for us, reuse it's been challenging. We ran pilots in Canada, the US, UK, Japan, France, with the world's biggest retailers, biggest brands. And it really struggled, but in France, it's taken off. Today you can go into almost any major French supermarket nationally. 400 different products are available to you in fully reusable packaging through our system, like your Nutella or your whatever shampoo or, whatever it may be. And you buy it, you pay a deposit. When you're done, you drop it off, it gets cleaned, filled back up, and sold to someone else.
Why do you think it worked in France, but not, say, in Canada?
I can tell you crystal clear. Regulation.
Because,
in France, there's the right regulatory environment. And the good news is Western Europe, UK are enabling that same regulatory environment. So we're going to see the expansion go in that region. And what the regs are doing is enabling carrots and sticks. The stick is they are mandating it. In 2027, French supermarkets must dedicate 5 to 10% of their floor space to reusable offerings.
Okay.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
But they're also giving carrots. Right now, the EPR, or Extended Producer Responsibility System, that's like the packaging taxes on packaging that's produced, has to dedicate 5% of its revenue, which is about $100 million in funding, to subsidize reuse systems until they get bigger.
Right.
And that is the role of regs, because in the end, I sort of view two types of sustainability activities that an organization can do, right? Or anyone, probably even an individual. There is the ones that just save us money. Hey, turn off your light bulbs when you leave your home. Put your air conditioning thermostat down when there's no one there. Drive an electric car and don't pay for petrol, or gas, right? Those things are cost savings that are synonymous with sustainability because you're just being smarter with resources. Mm-hmm. Everyone should do that. Oh my God. But that's not true sustainability. That's just being not, not being wasteful. You know what I mean? Using resources without wasting them.
Yeah.
The real sustainability questions, I think, are the ones that require sacrifice, that require us to stop doing something we like to do. Let's not eat animal protein.
Yes.
Let's not eat big bodies. Thinking of aquatic examples. Let's not eat endangered species. Let's not eat big-bodied fish that are going to go extinct. Let's, what I mean? Those are sacrifices. Mm-hmm. And the sacrifice is where regulation needs to come, because that's the only way at scale things will change. You're always going to find the person who, does it, or organization who leans in, but to really do it at scale, that's regulation. And we heard from so many retailers and brands, in the markets we tested that did not proceed, that, hey, we know it works. Consumers, there's no issue, but we don't want to take on the extra work of reuse until it's mandated, because it is extra work, even in the simplest of models, like our loop model, because instead of getting your packaging brand new from a packaging manufacturer, it's coming in having been used. So you have to spend a little more effort designing it so that it can come back and not break. And you have to put in a little bit of extra effort into doing health and safety checks on it when it comes in, right? And we're doing in reuse baby food, for example. So, and you don't know where that baby food jar went when it went out there into the universe. So you have to have some muscle, which is by definition extra effort, to make sure that package doesn't have microfractures on it and has been safely cleaned, right? And that extra effort is the sacrifice, if you will. And that's where regulation is really valued. And I really highlight this because, the world is going into a very aggressive deregulation moment.
This is really interesting, especially like the loop model. I remember when loop came out, didn't it have, maybe I'm confusing this, but wasn't it, they almost had a model where they can send it to your home, specific products in a bottle, right? Is that the same that's the same company, right?
It might be. So just to be clear, right? So when we first started, this was 2019. What we did is we went to all the major brands and said, hey, let's, please put your packaging. So like Haagen-Dazs to Tide laundry detergent, like we got everybody, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, I remember that.
Then we went to the retailers like Loblaw in Canada, Walmart in the US, and all the other likes. And they said to us, before we put this on shelf, we need to know that our consumers like it. So we told them, look, we'll launch it as an e-commerce model. We'll brand it Loblaw in Canada or Walmart in the US or Tesco in the UK, whatever. And let's prove that your consumers like it. And so we started as an online model to learn. It worked. Then we said to everyone, let's now move in store, right? Because we don't want to be the retailer. So we shut down the online models everywhere. We moved to in-store pilots, like, a dozen stores here, a dozen stores there. And honestly, everywhere it worked. But then when we pushed to scale and said, look, guys, can we now go from a dozen stores to like hundreds and hundreds? Yeah. That's where really, like the wheat and chaff separated. And everywhere but France, they said, we're happy to keep doing pilots until regulations come, but they're not here today. And in France, because the regs are there, it exploded.
So once they're mandated to do it, they'll do it. Yeah. But if they're not mandated to do it, why, even if they're not mandated to do it, what's the harm in doing it for them? It's
easy. Every organization, and there's nothing wrong with this. So what we teach our team, because it'll feel wrong when I say it, but the number one lesson we teach, folks who join TerraCycle is learn how the chess pieces on the chessboard move, and don't just understand how they move, empathize with how they move. Like a funny story is my 5-year-old, he likes playing chess, but he's offended by how the pawn moves. He doesn't get why does it only attack left to right. What is it? Only
Yeah.
move one step forward except the first move. He goes, that's so screwed up. And he's really upset about that. But because of that, he never wins.
Right.
If he not only accepted that it moves in a certain way, but empathized, really like was on the same page that this is awesome how it moves, then he could have a really good chance of winning.
Yeah.
And so how do corporates move? It's a simple thing that is the bounding movement. The bounding movement is make the most amount of money with the least amount of effort. Now, you see how that sounds wrong, by the way, right?
Yeah, I get it,
but
though. I get it.
It's the way water flows. It flows in that direction, right? And so why is reuse resisted? Is because a system where you have to design and deal with the package coming back is by definition always some extra work, cost, versus a system that's linear and you never have to worry about the thing coming back. And no matter how much you simplify it, it will never be as easy as a linear system.
Right.
Wow. It just cannot. I mean, even in places, by the way, where like reuse has been so big, like beer kegs. You know what the biggest trend in beer kegs are now? Single-use beer kegs.
Single-use beer kegs.
Oh yeah, it's massive. When you get a chance, look it up online. But basically, beer kegs are highly returnable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you think. But a lot of companies figured out that that's a hassle for the bars. So they make them single-use, and they're just, they look like a beer keg, but they're like plastic, whatever, and they just chuck them in the dumpster when they're done. And why are they popular? They're easier.
It's just convenience.
Yeah.
So when you look at trying to disrupt the market, like, because you guys are disrupting the market in terms of like how people think of waste, sometimes it requires behavior change. Like even my example of Arbonne, it requires me to collect these items and then bring them in to in this case it's what's the name of the place? The it's not Pure Later, it's
no, like a shipping
UPS
or something.
UPS, yeah. And it requires me to just kind of go out of my way, which is like, to be honest, it's not that big of a deal, but it's a change of behavior that a lot of people probably wouldn't want to do, right? Yeah. So how does TerraCycle combat that, like a behavior?
Excellent question. So the way we do it is three very clear phases. The first is the most unintuitive. We want you to change your behavior as little as possible.
Okay.
Like in Loop, for example, we were just talking about our internal sort of moniker, right, is we need reuse to feel like disposability in every way. One simple example of that is in our return bins. When you return the reusable packages, you can return them and put them in one at a time. You certainly can, but we also give you a reusable garbage bag that you can just throw them all into and drop it off like a bag of garbage. And then we will check in everything inside for you. So for the first part of behavior change is don't change the behavior because it's hard. Right. It is hard.
Yes.
So make it as little as possible. Then, and the answer to that is make it feel as much like what you do today.
Right.
Then it's about, so once you've done that and made it convenient as absolutely possible, then the other two things you can add on that will get you to do something greater than no behavior change is incentive and excitement. And excitement you can view as a type of incentive, but there's sort of three forms of incentive, right, that get you going. One is the baseline, which is it's better. You're doing something noble. You're helping. You're it's like volunteering somewhere. It's doing good, right? And that is an incentive that really matters. Interestingly, more to women than men, and especially more to women that care about other life forms in the order of plants, pets, and then children. Yep.
Interesting.
That's why the worst for the planet, demographically speaking, are single men. All right.
Right.
So both of us were that at some point, or are. Then the other form of incentive after doing the right thing, which is a powerful one, mind you,
very much,
is economic incentive. Maybe I give you, so in the reuse model, it's you get a deposit back, right? You get money back. And what's cool is that, for example, in France, when you get that money back, the product is cheaper than the disposable version, right?
Yeah.
So any economic incentive could be derivatives. It could be like coupons on something. It could be other things, but some form of economic incentive. And then the third incentive, which is unintuitive, is happiness. Happiness is different than doing the right thing. So what I mean by this is we did a study where we put in busy train stations in New York, like Grand Central Station, these sort of places, recycling bins and trash bins beside each other, well labeled. And we saw how many people put something obviously recyclable, like a soda bottle, in the right bin. And there's no extra hassle. They're literally beside each other, 50%. didn't do it correctly.
Okay.
So then we changed something, just happiness. We put a little sound detector into the recycling bin so that when you put something in the bin, it would play you back a sound effect, like an infinite drop or an applause or whatever. Some fun.
Yeah.
It went to 95% correct. And
Yeah.
we even noticed people going out of their way to pick up a bottle that wasn't theirs, to put it in the bin to
just
get
to hear
the
sound.
Happiness. And I want to say happiness is different than doing the right thing. Those are two different things.
Yeah. Because like doing the right thing sometimes is harder.
Yeah.
We almost think of it as harder. Like I have to eat better to be healthier, but that's sometimes harder than just eating like, you know, the stuff that's bad for me.
Sure.
But I think it tastes better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's almost like doing the noble thing is different than just smiling, you know? And it's those three things. Like, you know, you give economic benefit, you give happiness, and you give, doing the right noble thing.
That's really, really interesting. It's interesting. My daughter's going to University of Guelph. It's her first year this year. We're taking her in 2 days.
Nice.
We went to visit the campus, and at the campus they actually had this device. So you have your bins. There's like 4 different bins, and then they had a TV with a camera, and all you had to do was put your item that you want to throw out in front of the camera, and it would tell you what bin it would go.
That's cool. That's cool.
Right?
That's really cool.
Like you think, how come we don't have that anywhere else? Like why is this not all over the place?
It costs money.
It costs money, but such an interesting way of disposal. But I really like the sound because everybody loves sound. It could be music, it could be anything. And once you get it in the right bin and you can hit that right sound, you're almost gamifying in a way.
That's a big part of happiness. We do a lot of gamified collection bins. We've done these at like the Super Bowl and other places where like, imagine like an arcade room, but the machines, the thing you play with is a used aluminum can or used PET bottle, and that is your token to play. Like that's what you play with. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You know, you talk about the first thing was make it easy. Like make it like so it's like your regular routine. So normally every Monday I put out my garbage or recycling depending on the day at the edge of my curb. Has there been a model for Loop to go? I know it's more expensive, but to go and have a service to pick that up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer it this way. TerraCycle has a model like that. We call it TerraCycle Home. Yeah. In the U.S., I just know that number. It's available to 8% of the public today because we set up a geography at a time. But basically, it's curbside, and it actually gets cheaper.
Interesting.
But we have to get the density of enough people doing it. That's why I just can't launch it national. We have to go like zip code by zip code by zip code.
Which makes sense. Like
but
pilots.
You get these like zero waste bags. You fill it up with a certain waste stream, and then you put it on the curb, and it gets picked up by a local waste management company, and then it comes to us. So we are certainly doing that on the recycling side, but again, it's limited to where it's available. You can go to our website and see. But on the reuse side, because that was your question there, what we found is if we can get to 10% of the public using a Loop type service, we can enable curbside pickup.
So and then it's all about buying into the system and getting people to buy into the system.
Yes, because if you get enough people doing it, you can run a route that becomes economically efficient.
Now, you like TerraCycle has created like an opportunity, not only from selling new products and collecting waste. So you're having that opportunity of reducing waste and making it into another product and selling it and making. I assume you guys make money on the products that you sell in the various kind of ways, and you're a profitable company. It seems like there's a lot of opportunities in this space, in the waste and to creation to this space. Like for instance, having a delivery service or pickup service like in a different country, or like a company saying, hey, let's partner and we'll do here in Canada, a system where we're going to try and get a region and we'll do the pickup and then we'll send it to you and, work something out with that kind of way.
Yeah.
Is this like an opportunity where it can create jobs, create, a new set, launch a new set of entrepreneurs and businesses? Yeah. I guess the question is, if it is, why haven't people taken advantage of that?
Because
other than yourself, of course.
No, it's what we talked about at the top. You're absolutely right about all of it. Yeah. It's very blue ocean. It's also very fulfilling to solve.
Right.
You said, you mentioned that earlier. It's like, it's great to work at a purpose-driven company, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's because waste is the opposite of sexy. Yeah. It is super unattractive. it is not just shitty, smelly, nasty, metaphorically, it is in the flesh, you know?
Yeah.
I always make a funny joke about this. So imagine if you took the human body and then as a metaphor to business. What I mean by that is our immune system would be the healthcare business.
Right.
Our brain would be the IT business, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you put a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
What would be the garbage business?
Your
right?
butt.
Yeah. The thing that is, you know, the least attractive part of the whole body.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, like, you know, it's kind of funny you mentioned it that way, because I see, like, from a psychological point of view, people are like, well, hold on a second, I don't want to deal with that crap, because literally that's what we're talking about here. However, if it can reduce the amount of waste by a certain amount, even if you measure it by that amount, gamify it for your own company to say, like, hey, we've reduced amount. Just like a lot of plastic pollution companies like Four Oceans will say, we've picked up, you know, this amount
absolutely.
of thing.
Yeah.
It seems like they take off pretty well, and people like it. They like seeing the videos. They like seeing how things are made.
Look, I would say Alex at Four Ocean. I mean, these guys, it's a very small community. Or Boyan, with, you know,
we interviewed him last year. He's a great guy.
He's great. These guys are awesome. And they were able to hit like a nerve on that, like really brilliantly. You know, I think Alex did it really well with the bracelets, you know, at Four Oceans. I think Boyan did it incredibly well with the ocean cleanup project and the, you know, and all that. But for every one of them or me, there's like 1,000 guys who try a .com.
Right.
For the reason I said. Right. Because yes, you're seeing the polished success story, but going out and doing the cleanups Alex does is treacherous.
Yes.
You know, it is, yes, it shows up nice in a marketing video, but it is not something the average person wants to sign up for.
That's true.
It reeks. It's gross. And that's the thing on waste is it is, you know, it is that. And that's why it is generally unappealing to an average person. You know, I give this standing lecture at NYU every year. I've been doing that for 20 years to the inbound class at Stern. And it's just because it's a big audience size, right?
Yeah,
that's why I mention it here. And the point is I asked this big group of kids, who here aspires at all to even explore a career in waste? And honestly, in 20 years, not one hand has ever gone up. But you'd ask them, how many of you guys want to be in the entertainment industry or some other significantly more sexy industry? It's like you get meaningful participation.
Of course.
And that's an opportunity to anyone hearing this. It's that, like, you can really, you know, do something where there's not a lot of competition. It's very meaningful, you know, and there's not a lot of people playing in it. And it's a shame. I mean, it's why, for example, we set up our offices the way we do. If you Google TerraCycle offices, you'll see, like, it's really bright. We're majority female as an organization of our 500 team members. All this stuff, it doesn't feel like a garbage company. Because we want to show that it can be exciting. It can be something that is totally unexpected.
Yeah, and sometimes you gotta get smelly. Sometimes you gotta get dirty when you like.
You do,
this
but
is
no
not
one
an
likes
easy
it.
thing to clean up, right?
Right,
like this,
right. It's just not something that anyone looks forward to.
No, but it's also you with the results, like even that TerraCycle has done, and you guys have done it over 25 years, and I'm sure, you know, you've had your own, you know, set of problems and going up and down in terms of growing a company in today's world, but you've been able to accomplish a hell of a lot, including employing over 500 people in your companies worldwide, which I highly, you know, respect and give you props for, because that's something that, you know, you don't see every day, but also with the purpose of reducing waste and making it into something else. Because there are a lot of people who will say, well, we shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't be recycling things. We should be reducing our waste. And they're right.
Yeah.
But what do you do with the waste that's around? Instead of just putting it into a landfill, you got to do something with it.
That's right.
And if you can do something with it that's purposeful, then you can do a really good job in doing that. You know, Tom, this has been great. We could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Last question I wanted to ask, and please take your time in answering it. You have the website's great. I'm gonna have people, you know, to look at the website. How would you suggest for the people listening to this? I have a lot of people who want to do something for the environment, and what would you suggest how they can get involved with TerraCycle and some of the programs with TerraCycle to minimize their behavior change?
Yeah, no, well, thank you. So the easiest thing to do is go to the website, TerraCycle.com. When you get there, you're going to see in the recycling areas, because that's where you can really work with us anywhere in the world. Again, we use this right now, France only. Recycling is where you can really work with us anywhere you're listening to this. First, check out the free programs.
Okay.
Right? These are programs like your Arbonne program that you mentioned, where there's no cost. We pick up the waste, we process it. That's because sponsors are paying for it.
Gotcha.
And in many cases, it raises money for schools or charities of your choice. In many programs, donations are given. Not all of them, but many. We've donated out about $20 million to date in these forms of donations. So that's how you begin with us. It's come in, recycle. And then if you want to do more and you don't see a free program, there's a paid solution for just about everything available as well. And you can buy one of our zero waste boxes or zero waste bags and recycle almost anything you'd like.
Yeah.
With that said, though, there's one step before you should do anything with us, which is the biggest message I can leave is the most powerful thing we do in shaping the world is what we buy and what we don't buy. I think it's the most fiercely democratic action. Let's remember, like, how often do we get to vote? Like once every 4 years, and many of us don't even have the privilege of voting because maybe we're too young or not a citizen or whatever, right? We vote for for the future with what we buy and what we don't buy. And let's just, next time we shop, because we all shop this way. Imagine everything you buy, 2 will appear tomorrow. 1 to replace the one you bought, and 1 to signify the trend. And 1 less will appear of everything you didn't buy. There's nothing to replace, but there's a negative trend.
Yeah.
Will you shop differently?
Yeah. I like that. So whatever you buy will double.
Yes.
Whatever you don't buy will actually lessen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, the crazy part, it's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's true.
There's no metaphor here. It's like straight up what hames.
Yeah, but it's training your mind to think about that every time you make a purchase.
Because we are voting blindly.
Yeah.
We are voting without realizing that is what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great thing. And also like that's from an individual standpoint. There are a lot of businesses, like even my company, like the company that I work for, we have, mixed recyclables and garbage, but a lot of times, like in the city that I live in, there may not be like a recycling program for businesses. It may not come and pick it up. You mentioned some of the paid versions, like there's a zero waste box. Can you just talk a little bit before we go about how that works? Yeah,
absolutely. So in the paid solutions, and we are half B2B, half B2C. So we do tons in facility recycling, whether it's hazardous materials like light bulbs, batteries, electronic waste, all the way to non-hazardous like latex gloves and personal protective equipment and all this stuff. So you just go to our website, you type in the waste stream into the search bar, and you're going to see if there are free solutions, you'll see those, totally use those. If not, you're going to see paid solutions, which we call our zero waste boxes. Basically, you can buy a zero waste box for just about anything, and they go as small as a little pouch, as big as a pallet, so every size you can imagine. And you receive the device, you fill it up. The cost already includes us picking it up from you. So, you can put it into a UPS, or if it's a pallet, we pick it up with a truck. And then everything inside gets recycled. And the cost of the box is basically whatever it costs us to get you a box, pick it up full, recycle everything inside, minus what the resulting materials are worth. That's how how the prices come to be. And through the zero waste box system, you can, again, recycle just about anything you want.
I love that. I love that. Plus, it's great for your employees, like to know that. Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
It's a really easy sustainability solution for a small business. Like if you're a coffee shop, imagine the value of suddenly offering coffee bag recycling or coffee cup recycling or organics, like the coffee grounds, right? Or if you're a automotive shop, what about recycling all the plastic gloves, or motor oil containers, that are produced, or broken wipers, and whatnot. Right? There's something like that everywhere. Use that as a bit of
a selling item. Be like, hey, by the way, this is what we do here. If you want,
that's right. If
that's important to you.
Like my local swimming pool through TerraCycle does goggle and bathing suit recycling, and that's a draw for them. Like they tell people, and people come in just to drop it off, and then maybe they'll go for a swim. Who knows?
Stay for a swim. It's a great way to bring people in. I love that. I love that aspect, Tom. This has been so great. I'd love to invite you back on, talk more about TerraCycle, because I think we're just scratching the surface. You have been so insightful for a lot of us and motivating for a lot of us who are listening to this. I know for me, definitely. But I want to thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. It's been great to have you on.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we cross paths.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Such a great talk, such a great interview, to be able to hear such positive messaging around waste, and the fact that there's so many opportunities around waste, and to work within waste, and to start businesses to handle waste, and to really truly build recyclable materials, or out of like recycling materials to build products for people to consume. I think this is something that's really interesting. I think, Tom's right. He's like, a lot of people just don't want to do it because it's stinky and it could be messy and it can be difficult to work with. But if you have the right idea, you have the right motivation, you want to reduce waste, this is what we need to do. And of course, I'm going to say it again because I know people are going to call me out on it. We still have to reduce the amount of waste that we create. We have to reduce it. As Tom said, when you're looking at buying something that has waste, there's two things that replace it. If you buy a bottle, like a pop bottle, soda bottle, or a sugary drink in a plastic bottle, there's two things to replace that. But if you don't buy it, it actually reduces the amount that there is. So that's something to think about when you start purchasing things, and you want to be mindful of that. And so I think it's a great way to just shift your mind. A lot of this stuff is just shifting your mind, maybe changing your behavior just a little bit, or duplicating your behavior and doing something a little different that really makes a difference. And I think that's something that I would like to explore a little bit more in that is, how do we change our behavior? How do we get people to change behavior, to be more resourceful, to be more mindful of how we can live for a better ocean? So I want to thank Tom. I'm going to go and point people to TerraCycle's website, which is terracycle.com. I'll put it in the show notes, the link in the show notes. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Instagram, DM me at How to Protect the Ocean. Or of course, if you go to my website, speakupforblue.com/contact, you can fill out the contact form. It goes right to my email, and I'll answer you as soon as possible. I want to thank you so much for Tom for joining us on this podcast, and thank you for listening and your insightful questions, any concerns or anything, comments. We'd love to hear from you. I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.